Well, we're back after the holiday and we are ready to roll. And I'm here in Los Angeles. I'm Bryce Abel. Let me bring in my partner, Ross Coulthart, over in Australia. How were your holidays, Ross?
They were very good, Grandpa Bryce.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Ross is, I didn't think I'd make it 30 seconds into this before that came up. Yes, I'm a grandfather, first time grandfather. I'm way too young to be a grandfather, of course, but these things happen. It's, it is interesting though. The birth of my granddaughter happened at 11 o'clock at night on New Year's Eve. And so it was touch and go all night long, whether it was going to be a New Year's baby or a New Year's Day baby. And it's actually both, because if you think about it, my granddaughter was born at 11 o'clock at night Pacific Coast time, which means she was also born on the 20 in 2024 on the East Coast. So she's got it all. She's going to be celebrating birthdays like you can't believe. Anyway, that's what I've been up to and some other things, but it was a good holiday. Glad to be back.
Well, after the smoking ruin that was the UFO disclosure, UAP disclosure at the end of 2023, I wonder what kind of world she's going to grow up in. I wonder if she will grow up in a world where there is an admission about an NHI, a non-human intelligence on this planet.
I I agree with you, and I know we're going to talk later about 2024 and beyond. But actually, um, that is something I've been thinking about. Seeing this little girl and thinking about what her life is going to turn out to be, and what about this shadow of this secrecy over this UAP UFO issue? I tend to come down on the point of view that we should be doing what we perceive is right for her at this point. She's got the new life she's starting. We've had our time to run this thing, and we probably haven't done the best job in the world. So I would say it's time for all of us to sort of admit that there is something extraordinary going on with this phenomenon, to ask ourselves what we should do about it, and to let the decisions that we make about it be the ones that are most relevant to these young people, because they are going to inherit the world that we let be an 80-year secret. So that's kind of my take as a grandfather.
So let's talk about 2023. I mean, obviously, the year ended with a desolate landscape. You saw the emasculation, the castration of the proposed Senator Schumer Amendment to the National Defence Authorization Act, an amendment that would have brought in a 9-member review panel appointed by the president to essentially declassify the UAP records going back the last 80, 90 years. It would have also imposed eminent domain confiscation on any NHI technology or biologics. It would have been a groundbreaking moment. And I just think about what might have been if that momentous legislation had been passed at the end of last year. But I still think, my friend, we've come a long way in the last few years. Even though there's been that enormous setback, there have been such enormous advances, enormous breakthroughs in terms of disclosure.
I agree. I did, before we went on, write down what I thought were the highlights of 2023. I think there can be no doubt that David Grusch is the highlight. I wrote down the year of Grusch. I mean, whether it was, uh, he had his fingers in everything this year. And frankly, Ross, kudos to you and to the other reporters over at the Debrief, Leslie Kane and Ralph Blumenthal, who broke the story. You, of course, got Grusch on News Nation in the shot that was the interview that was heard around the world. But in addition to the year of Grusch, these are the other highlight stories that I think of from last year. Those congressional hearings, where not only did Dave Grusch show up, but so did David Fravor and Ryan Graves, and they all held their hands up and swore to tell the truth. And they testified under oath before Congress. And anyone who has seen Dave Grush's interview with you, or the many other interviews he's done since, knows that he was telling the same story to Congress under oath. So think about that. The other thing that you mentioned, of course, that was the big news was the Schumer Rounds Amendment. It didn't turn out to be, I mean, as written, it was mind blowing, as we pointed out, some 20 references to non human intelligence. It didn't get passed the way that we thought it might. but it did get passed in some form. There is UAP language in it. And that seems to be something that has happened now. Every year, the National Defense Authorization Act goes forward, and there's language put in about UAP, and it makes it through. The other big story, of course, from 23 was the February shoot downs of the UAP over the United States. A story that is still, according to your own reporting, still a story and has not been satisfactorily explained. So, there are other things, but those are what I would call the big four.
It's funny, I just want to put on record something that Chuck Schumer said in his 13th of December colloquy. I had to look that word up, by the way. I'd never heard of a colloquy with Senator Mike Rounds, where they lamented the blocking of the Schumer Amendment. And this is what he said. And I think this is going to turn out, I think, in the long run, to be a very significant statement by Senator Schumer. Quote, we've also been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch, especially as it relates to the 4 congressional leaders, the defense committees, and the intelligence committees. Now, I'm told also that that is a statement of intent by Senator Schumer. They're not going to let the UAP disclosure issue go. They are aware, of course, that their attempts to get through legislation were blocked. But I do think we're going to see more action in Congress, and I think that's already underway.
It seems, Ross, that what's increasingly happening, whether you are satisfied or dissatisfied with the breaking of the news, but what's increasingly happening is that people are saying the quiet part out loud. The stuff that used to be talked about on the fringes is now right there front and center. Because at that same meeting, by the way, where Schumer said what you just quoted, Rounds was in that meeting and he gave his own speech, and he referenced, this is a quote from his speech, UAP material or biological remains that may have been provided to private entities in the past and thereby hidden from Congress and the American people. I mean, for crying out loud, that thing is fraught with disclosure thoughts and confrontations at the legislative level. I mean, it's acknowledging UAP material, biological remains, private entities such as those aerospace companies that don't want to have anything they've got taken by eminent domain. And then also the idea of secrecy, ongoing secrecy, that have kept information about this UAP issue from the American people and also from Congress. So if you just go with what these two guys said in their sort of farewell to their NDAA contribution back in December, as you said, they've put some stuff on the table that's going to have big ramifications in 2024.
Now, I noticed, I just want to put it on record as well, Bryce, there's been some speculation that there was no pushback from the defense aerospace industry. One commentator suggested that it was rubbish, that the aerospace industry was running a lobby against the Schumer Amendment. And I'm telling you, there's nothing further from the truth than that assertion. I know for a fact, because I've spoken to people in defense aerospace who admit that they were running a lobby, particularly against the eminent domain legislation. And frankly, as I've indicated on the podcast before, I'm kind of sympathetic to this. If you're an aerospace company and you were gifted by the American government 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, non-human technology, and asked to investigate and invest public corporation monies into trying to back engineer that technology, why should the state have the right to assert the right to confiscate those assets? I think the state should have a right to know about them. But there does become, there's a concept in law, essentially, of a prescriptive easement, that when you've been in possession of land, property for 30 years, after a while you own it, unless somebody's contested that ownership. And that's in English law. And I just wonder whether it's fair that the Congress was proposing eminent domain for companies that perhaps indeed have spent their own money on trying to reverse engineer this technology. And I guess I just want to flag that maybe Congress did go a bit too far. Maybe the eminent domain laws were a bad idea. I'd certainly like to see that issue discussed, and I suspect that anything new that comes out of Congress might take that in mind. I'd certainly be very sad if we don't ever see the 9-member Presidential Records Review Board, because I think that's a very, very important part of the declassification process.
Well, you and I are always going to disagree about the eminent domain issue. We did a round about that in our last episode. I just see it differently. But one thing I did want to bring up here is going into this one, we had used our Need to Know Twitter platform to ask people to comment on various things they thought were the most important of 23 and what they thought might be happening in 24. But a lot of people took the time to ask questions. And on that issue, I just wanted to read this one person's question. I wish I could find their name, but I don't have it in front of me right now. But they wrote, if only a select few defense contractors have UAP materials, then why aren't the other defense contractors suing the government for such unfair treatment? Having crash materials or even intact crafts must be the biggest competitive advantage ever. And I thought, Ross, that's actually a different POV for us to look through this one. What's your take? We may disagree about whether eminent. I'm not a lawyer like you are, so I'm not legally up to speed on what eminent domain must be, but I'm certainly sympathetic to the use of it to get these things. But let's answer this person's question. If only a select few have the materials, why aren't the other defense contractors suing them to get in on the game?
Look, that's a very good point, Bryce. And look, under the SEC laws, under your disclosure laws in your public corporations laws in America, like here in Australia and in Europe and the UK, there is a requirement for full and continuous disclosure. So if you're floated on the American Stock Exchange as a public corporation like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, one of the big defense aerospace companies, you're obliged to reveal anything that is material to your share price. And so if somebody buys shares and sells those shares without ever being told that they're sitting on, maybe Lockheed Martin, for example, let's just hypothesize Lockheed Martin. Let's suggest that, say, Lockheed Martin had a couple of flying saucers sitting in their basement, possibly the most valuable items on the planet. It would be materially relevant to the share price of that corporation that the shareholders are not being told the value of the assets that are held within the company. And if somebody sold their shares, they would have a legitimate claim on the corporation for not revealing the extent of their interests in those assets. And I do know there are plaintiff lawyers that are already in the process of preparing legal actions. And this may be one of the ways that this story is eventually pried out into the open. And I can tell you, I've had conversations with not high level, but fairly senior executives in one defense aerospace corporation that reached out at me. And they were speaking hypothetically, but clearly with intent. And we were discussing exactly this point, that there is an obligation on corporations to disclose what they have because it's materially relevant to share price. And those corporations, if it's true that they are sitting on recovered non-human technology, it is the most valuable item on the planet, beyond any shadow of a doubt. It'd be worth more than anything else. And I can see why they would be fighting to keep control of that technology. And I can see why they would also be terrified of having to account to their shareholders for the fact that they've never revealed that they've got it.
It's it's a problem. It's interesting. About a decade ago, Richard Dolan and I wrote AD After Disclosure, which is relevant to what everybody is talking about right now. Is there going to be disclosure, confirmation, limited disclosure, catastrophic disclosure? You pick from the menu what you think. But one thing that Dolan and I stumbled across as a core belief early on was that a lot of how disclosure will be handled has already been sort of laid out in how we've handled other things. So, for example, we came to the conclusion that the courts would be extremely active in disclosure. We have just raised one of those issues right now. As an example, the eminent domain issue ultimately won't be resolved by what Ross thinks or I think. It'll be resolved eventually in a court. Another great example of that, just so you can do your own homework at home thinking about these possibilities. But one of them would be, okay, if the government knew about the existence of UAP and had seen proof of it and felt that it was a complicating factor for air safety, then there's probably some class action suits that could be filed. What about all the passengers who wouldn't have gotten on a plane if they thought that there were really UAP flying around there? What about all the pilots who tried to report a UFO and then found their career floundering because they were ridiculed and stigmatized? A lot of these people may have lawsuits in the future, and it won't stop with those issues. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of things that are on the table, and we're just now, as we peek through the curtains and say, wow, disclosure isn't as impossible as it used to be, you start to ask these questions. And on impossible, I'll just leave with this one thought. At the end of our process, Richard and I came up with the only way we could think to explain it. We said disclosure is impossible but inevitable, and which of course is a contradiction. And yet, if I had to write that book again this year, I would leave out the impossible. It's no longer impossible. I mean, maybe it's not in front of us, but it's definitely somewhere out there and could be happening. I think it's inevitable. The questions that are going to be further discussed in 2024 and in the years beyond that are going to be the questions of inevitability. If it's inevitable, are we doing the proper amount of work to do it right? And I would say, Ross, based on all the shows that you and I have done over the last couple of years, the answer to that would have to be a resounding no. If what is currently going on with disclosure is somebody's grand plan, then I don't think it was thought out. We're sort of lumbering toward disclosure is more how I would put it these days.
I think you're right, Bryce. I don't think there is a plan for disclosure. I mean, I think there are some people that think that there is a concerted group inside the Pentagon who are, actively lobbying against a mass of people who are opposed to try and push this out into the open. I think what is the case is that there are individuals. And the thing I'm fascinated in, and I'm going to draw on your understanding of American presidential politics, which is probably better than mine. I'm just wondering, we're going into an election year here. Do you think UAPs will be an election year issue in 2024?
You'd have to say no based on where we stand right now, because for years I've been saying it's going to get in the election. I was saying that about 2020, and then I was saying about October surprises, which still is a possibility, I would imagine. But so far, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that it will find its way in a legitimate way into either the debates or the election itself. Because for it to be legitimate, you would have to take it seriously. And we've only got one great example of that from the debates when Chris Christie was asked about it and completely turned it into a joke and had the audience laughing. And let's face it, UAPs, such as they exist, are a national security concern. The government itself has told us that. And yet, it didn't get in those debates. So here's what I would say. We're about to talk about 24. There are a number of things which, if they happen in the middle of a campaign, could cause those issues to get into the debates. Currently, no, not likely. Then, of course, you have the fact that you have two presidents, potentially Biden and Trump, running against each other. These guys have a better idea than most about what's actually going on out there. They've seen some classified stuff. Maybe they were given an opportunity not to get the full briefing, so they'd have plausible deniability. I can't speak to that, but they know more of the details than the average citizen. And either one of them could get desperate and say, I need a big distraction in this election or I'm going to lose. And it could go either way. I could make an argument for either one of them doing it. So yeah, not going to get there now, might easily happen based on something that we're not foreseeing right at this moment.
I mean, if I was Joe Biden, knowing that you've got the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, on side, you've got some key Democrat leaders who are actually quite motivated, and much more motivated than I think they're willing to say publicly, I would pull an October surprise. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine if you're the president of the United States and you come to the podium, and let's hypothetically, for the debunkers out there, let's assume this is all true. Let's assume that it is the case that the United States is sitting on non-human technology, that there are non-human biologics sitting in a shed somewhere that are being guarded by grim-faced soldiers. And let's assume that for some national security reason that we don't quite understand, maybe it's to do with weaponry, the US is keeping this all secret. I still don't understand, and I think you and I have discussed this many times, I still do not understand why a president can't show leadership, can't show moral spine, and admit, at least, we are not alone. I mean, I think the evidence for that is increasingly becoming overwhelming.
It-
And if I was a president looking for a way of unifying the American people in your beautiful but terribly fractured country, I don't think I've ever seen America so divisive as I did when I was traveling around America in November, October this year. It's just amazing to me how bitterly divided your country is at the moment. And looking from out within, it's shocking. And if I was a president, I'd be looking for something that could unify the people. And what could be more unifying than, say, in October 2024, an American president walks to the podium and says, ladies and gentlemen, it's time we told you the truth. We are not alone.
Yeah. Well, lots of luck. Don't go to Vegas and put any money on that one, my friend. Listen, the truth of the matter is, as an example, I have a column I write on Medium, and the article I wrote that got the most traction of everything I've done there was the speech I wrote for Joe Biden trying to explain that we're not alone. And people enjoyed that, but it was an act of fiction and not nonfiction. Richard Dolan and I in AD After Disclosure actually started with a presidential announcement, only because it was dramatic and we're drawn to the drama. But the truth of the matter is, the president is not likely to lead. The president is likely to follow. Biden was not the first guy out there when we were shooting down drones from China or wherever. He came to speak about it later. And clearly, if something that gives great evidence toward the existence of UAP as being NHI, well, Biden won't probably be the first guy to have to speak about it. Having said that, though, when you talk about the divisiveness in this country, which is so true, you also have to say it's in unsettled times that the chance of something that has been regimented and organized around, such as the UAP reality issue, the more crazy the times are, the more likely it can slip out. And I think we know one thing about Donald Trump, and please don't send me letters or emails about this. It's just an observation. He tends to say what he's thinking about. And he speak first and worry about it later, which, many of his supporters like. But the question is, if he does that, if there is UAP news that is getting him asked about it, he's liable to say probably more than he was supposed to. So it could get interesting fast. And that might be what draws Biden into the East Wing to deliver some kind of speech. I don't look for it because I've been hoping for it for so damn long, thinking that it should happen. Now I say it's not the thing it's not the start. It's just a continuation of something that goes on. So that's my take.
I should explain, Bryce, my main camera crapped out while you and I were talking just now, so I've had to go to my laptop camera. So I apologize for the scene change.
I love that you have operational redundancy, and I hope that obviously what you've got for redundancy is what these UAP should have, because they keep crashing.
No, basically it's just because I'm a technological Luddite and I'm doing something wrong with my camera. So listen. One thing I think we should try and do is preview 2024, and I guess what's coming up first is this Oversight and Accountability Committee meeting, which is happening sometime next week. Some people have said the 9th, some people have said the 12th. I think it's more likely to be the 12th, and that's when there is finally going to be an opportunity for Thomas Monheim, the intelligence community inspector general, to be questioned by members of the Oversight Committee, which is a House committee, about the circumstances in which he was approached by David Grusch with complaints about the UAP issue and also the investigations that he conducted into Mr. Grusch's allegations. And I just want to warn people that I don't think, because they don't have the clearances, I don't think this is going to be a carte blanche briefing to all of these members. They're not read in. They don't have the tickets that allow them to be read in, to be security briefed about such extensive special access programs as the ones that David Grusch has revealed. So I think the best case scenario that we might get is an opportunity for the committee to at least satisfy itself that the Inspector General does believe that, yes, Mr. Grusch's allegations are credible. And moreover, I'm hoping and praying that these committee members have the courage and the bravery to ask, is there other corroborative evidence which has been relied on by the Inspector General to make that conclusion? And that's the key point, because my understanding is that the Inspector General did question witnesses, that people came forward and gave evidence to the Inspector General that corroborated David Grusch's allegations. And it was on that basis that the Inspector General took the issue to the Senate and to the House Intelligence Committees. And this is a really important moment at the beginning of 2024 to get the intelligence community Inspector General just to state clearly and definitively on the record why he found Mr. Grusch's allegations to be credible. And I think that's very,
Do you think
very
that's going
important.
to happen? Do you think that'll happen?
Well,
That
a lot
it'll be a
hangs, my
public
friend,
statement?
a lot
Yeah.
hangs on whether or not the committee members can be read in to any of these special access programs. Because I think part of the problem is that the Oversight Committee does not normally look at the intelligence community. And the two intelligence community committees, there are a couple of friends of disclosure on the Intelligence Committee in the Senate. But frankly, the HIPSI in the House has basically been taken over by the defence aerospace industry, and so there's not really much chance of that committee asking hard questions. And so I guess a lot hangs on whether there can be a temporary read-in. It is possible for committee members on the Oversight Committee to get a special temporary read-in, which allows them to be temporarily read in and briefed into at least some of the special access programs that Grusch is talking about. But my understanding is that there's about 20 to 25 SAPs, which are compartmentalized secret information, which essentially those committee members would have to be read into for them to be read into the full extent of what Mr. Grusch knows. And that's kind of hilarious when you think about it, Bryce, because if, as the debunkers say, this is all BS, why is there a national security classification on what Mr. Grusch knows?
It's a mystery, isn't it? It's a mystery.
It
Listen,
just
I think
blows
that's
me
all
away.
true. And I hope that there is a public component to that because we deserve it and it would add some clarity. Just a couple of things I wrote down on 24, by the way, Ross, that I believe we might as well throw out there. On the for sure is going to happen, two publishing things sound like they should be on that list. Lue Elizondo is probably going to drop that book of his that he's been talking about for so long. And supposedly it's going to be explosive. I'm not sure in what direction, and maybe you do. And I also hear that Grusch has promised to do some kind of op-ed talking about his firsthand experience, might be in the New York Times, might be in some other location. Do you have any thoughts on what's in Elizondo's book or Grusch's article?
Look, what I do know about Lue Elizondo's book is that apparently whatever is redacted, because it's still before the DOPSA, it's still before the Defence Office pre-publication security review for approval. And Lue's told me that whatever is not allowed to be published in the book, he's going to include the black redactions to make it clear to people how much and what has been excised. And I think that's going to be very wearing on the minds of the people in defence, that the public are probably going to get to see for the first time just what is being redacted or how much is being redacted. I am hearing that it's taking a lot longer for Mr. Elizondo to get his approval for his book than was expected. And I can only hope and pray that it happens sometime in this year, because really, frankly, it depends on them. It depends on the Defense Department as to how long they take. And the other query was David Grusch. My understanding is that David was recently cleared by DOPSA, the Defence Office Pre-Publication Security Review, to be able to speak with a little bit more detail about certain things that he wants to talk about. There was hope that he was going to be able to put this into an op-ed sometime in January, but it's looking like it might more likely be in February. But yes, we can expect an op-ed piece, an editorial feature written by David Grusch, which hopefully more clearly states what he knows and his position on the UAP mystery sometime in the next few weeks.
That's all good news. And, I guess the one thing I want to just, speaking to our friends Lue Elizondo and David Grusch, with Lue, I would say, make sure your book deals with that assessment that you so famously made, that if you knew what I knew, you'd be sober about it, or somber. He said somber, right? He'd be somber. People want to know the answer to that. So please don't write a book that doesn't tell us that. And Grush's op-ed, remember, he's a great American hero. He's a great world hero. He's so smart and he's so truthful. But the people who have tried to take him down a peg always tried to do that by saying, well, what's his firsthand experience? So I hope, to the extent that his article can address any aspects of that, I think he should try to do it. The other thing that I'd be curious about is, what role do you think AARO is going to take in 24? We know they're under new leadership, or soon will be, rather. What do you think they're going to do? What role will they play?
Look, it's interesting, because a lot of the way AARO conducted itself previously was very much under the influence of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And I know people inside AARO. I've spoken to some other people inside AARO who are good people, and they're very motivated. They want you to know what they know, and they're very interested in trying to help the American public and the world find out more about the UAP mystery. And I think, frankly, inside AARO, there's a sense of relief that Dr. Kirkpatrick has moved on. Oh, and by the way, Bryce, seeing we're on the subject, since we last broadcast,
Right.
as I predicted, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick has indeed gone to work at the Oak Ridge Nuclear Laboratory. As it's very, very funny, because I put in a Freedom of Information Act request when I got a tip that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, while he was working at AARO, was being listed as a staff member. And sure enough, when I searched online, Dr. Kirkpatrick was listed as a staff member at Oak Ridge Nuclear Laboratory. And then, of course, when I put an FOI in, there was a denial that came back a few weeks after I'd gone public with this information, saying that he wasn't working at Oak Ridge Nuclear Laboratory. And I think somebody in the IT department had put what everybody already knew up online in anticipation of his appointment. Anyway, it came out in December that he is joining Oak Ridge Nuclear Laboratory. And I think that's very, very significant, because, of course, that's a DOE-run facility in conjunction with a local university. And it's the Department of Energy, of course, that controls, I suspect, a lot of the UAP secrets.
And have for a long time. People may not appreciate it. People always, their first thing is, well, it's the Air Force that must be investigating UFOs. But in reality, the Navy's been front and center as long as the Air Force. And, the Department of Energy, most people thought, well, it'd be the Department of Defense that's all over the UFO issue. But in reality, the Department of Energy was created to watch over our nation's top secret, which was nuclear power. And given that UFOs have been spotted repeatedly in a context of our nuclear energy and nuclear weapons standings, then I guess that's also a good reason why the Department of Energy may be part of that. But by the way, just the whole finding Sean Kirkpatrick on the payroll, man, that's journalism that I just love. It made me smile, and I again tip the old hat that I don't have on right now, but I tip it to you, because whereas David Grusch was monumentally important, what you did with Kirkpatrick on that is you just ask questions. You're just doing your job. You're just
Yeah, but
running
the
around
lovely
looking
thing
at.
about it, the lovely thing about it, Bryce, is it came from a tip, and that's the very important thing. Is journalists like myself and like yourself, we rely on tips. We rely on people giving us a heads up. And the thing I like is that your country, I mean, where I live in Australia, a lot of people hate the media. They really do. And in America, I think there's a civics concept that is imbued in you in schools that recognizes the importance of media scrutiny, about the scrutiny of the fourth estate. And the thing I'm heartened by is that, yeah, okay, we've had a huge setback with the knockback of the Schumer Amendment. We're not going to get the Presidential Records Review Board. We're not going to get eminent domain. But there's still an attitude inside the public service, inside the government, inside the military, that the media and the public have a right to know this stuff. Broadly speaking, excuse me for a moment. Broadly speaking, the
If that's
people
Sean
that
Kirkpatrick calling you right now, I'm just curious.
I don't know who it was, but it was bad timing.
If it is, say
Broadly
hi for me.
speaking,
Right.
broadly speaking, that the people that I talk to inside the program, scientists inside the program, they do not think there is any good justification for this to continue to be kept secret. Yes, they do think that there is potential weaponry, potential energy technology that should be kept confidential, but they think the public have the right to know. And as we go into 2024, I just find it absurd that coming into 2024, my good friend Daniel Otis, a Canadian investigative journalist, asked Susan Gough, the Defense Department spokesperson, for the official US Defense Department position on UFOs. And she gave a statement just in the last few days. And this is how we start 2024 with the Defense Department. The AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has not discovered any verifiable information to substantiate claims that any programs regarding the possession or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. Now, firstly, that's not answering Daniel's question. Daniel
Not
was
really.
asking about evidence inside the Defense Department. And there's this very coy and very clever response, which is always directed on behalf of AARO. It's not responding on behalf of the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of the Department of Energy. And to me, that is the disingenuous aspect of the way the Defense Department is playing this game. They're playing this game for some reason that you and I don't understand. They're delaying giving a definitive Defense Department response. So for 2024, I don't want to hear what AARO thinks. I don't want to know whether AARO has found out any verifiable information, because I pretty much know that under Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, they weren't looking. They weren't bothered to look because he didn't want to know.
Although,
The big
if I'm not
question now.
mistaken, though, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's right.
I was just going to say,
Um,
if I'm not mistaken, didn't Kirkpatrick confirm something to the effect that some 40 people had come in and told their rather convincing stories to him? Am I
well,
making
and
that up?
that's
Or
the
did I?
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it boils down to what you regard as verifiable information. And we're not clear because we don't get a report from AARO, or actually, is it from AARO? I'm not sure. No, it's a separate issue. Under the National Defense Authorization Act that was signed at the end of 2022, there is still a requirement for an annual report. And that's an annual report which will come in June. And one of the things that I know AARO is meant to be doing is this additional, very, very significant historical record report on UAPs. It was meant to have been done within 540 days of the enactment date of the National Defense Authorization Act in 2022, which was the 22nd of December. And so I did my numbers the other night, and that means that on the 14th of June this year, we are required to be provided to Congress a historical record. And this is a really amazing piece of legislation, Bryce. It is going to require, oh my God, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. It is going to require that not later than 540 days, so that's the 14th of June after the enactment of the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023, the director of the office shall submit to the Congressional Defense Committees, the Congressional Intelligence Committees, and the Congressional Leadership a written report detailing the historical record of the US government relating to UAPs, including the records and documents of the intelligence community, oral history interviews, open source analysis, interviews of current and former government officials, classified and unclassified national archives, including any records any third party obtained, any other relevant historical sources. And it also has to focus on the period beginning on January the 1st, 1945, and ending on the date on which the director of the office completes activities under this subsection. Needs to include a compilation and itemization of key historical record of the involvement of the intelligence community with UAPs, including any program or activity that was protected by restricted access that has not been explicitly and clearly reported to Congress, any successful or unsuccessful attempts to identify and track UAPs, any efforts to obfuscate, manipulate public opinion, hide or otherwise provide incorrect, unclassified or classified information about unidentified anomalous phenomena. And those records shall be made available to the National Archives records shall be made available to this office, and they shall be maintained by the National Archives with essentially the intention that they eventually be released and declassified to the public. This is a potentially momentous year if they do their job.
That's a big if, but that's also fascinating to me. And I think I understand why so many of the people who listen or watch our show are focused on, well, are we going to get disclosure this year? I'm not sure that we even understand what the definition of disclosure is, because when I talk to people, different people think about it differently. All I can say is it appears that the historical arc of history is literally that we are at the end of the beginning. All right. The beginning may have gone on 80 years, but now we put a wrap on that. And now we're getting on with disclosure of a type. But remember, there's disclosure and there's disclosure. I, being a Hollywood type, look at it from those points of view. And I say, you can either have a slow dissolve or a hard cut. And I think that's at the nature of what some of the people are asking about. They think that, if we don't have a plan and we don't do this in an organized way, we're going to have what is commonly now being called catastrophic disclosure. And I'm not even sure that's the point. It is true that stalling, the gatekeepers who are stalling are not making this easier for themselves, because there are so many things on the table right now that could happen that would escalate us rapidly to the hard cut of disclosure instead of the slow dissolve. So it does seem to me that there is pressure building to get on with this thing. And I think that's appropriate. And I just wanted to throw a couple of things out. I just started making a list before we went on of things that are always out there that, if they happened before the time we're in, would have been more astonishing today. And an example of that would be a mass sighting. Those of you who remember the Phoenix incident from 1997, that managed to still get swept under the rug. It wouldn't get swept under the rug today. A mass sighting over a major city anywhere in the world, particularly in America, would blow things apart. More hearings would certainly escalate the situation. New whistleblowers. In fact, I don't know where I heard this. Maybe it's just in my own head, but imagine if a group of whistleblowers all tell their story at the same time and dare the government to arrest them. Because if the story they're telling isn't true, then you can't be arrested for telling a non-true story, I don't think. So that would be interesting. As we talked about before, an actual statement from the White House, but I don't think that's coming. But there could be evidence of military contractors being in possession of this technology. There could be evidence of biologics. I mean, I'm not making that word up. Dave Grusch uses it all the time. How about a deathbed statement from Jimmy Carter? Not likely to happen, but again, something like that would focus people's impressions around it. Finding a photographic piece of evidence of an underwater base, um, you know, an international collaboration leads to Canada or Mexico or China or Russia, somebody doing their own disclosure. I mean, there's just a lot on the table right now, Ross, and any one of them could blow the door down a little bit more and somebody else picks up and charges through it. So we are literally, as we talked about with the presidential stuff, there's one way to look at it, but every day we wake up and think about this topic, there's the possibility that everything we thought the situation was that day won't be that way tomorrow. And that is, I guess, why we like being journalists too, because it's always exciting. You're always learning new things. So we'll see.
Yeah, and look, just one thing I want to end with, Bryce, for today is I'm hearing a lot of rumours about the James Webb Space Telescope having detected something significant. I tweeted about it just yesterday, but apparently NASA's announced the detection of a potential signature of extraterrestrial life in the atmosphere of a planet located 120 light years away. And apparently the James Webb Space Telescope produced a potential detection of the molecule dimethyl sulfide, which is only produced by living organisms on Earth. It's a tentative detection, and they're preaching caution before they declare it's aliens. But what we can expect is that there's going to be clarification of that this year. And I think that's one thing that the government of the United States is already aware of and sitting on. I think they know the answer already. That's at least what I've been told.
I think that's true. And I'll just find this moment of closure. One thing that started happening in 23 at a greater pace, and certainly is happening now, is there's a continuing shift in perception going on. It used to be thinking about aliens traveling across the vast distances of the universe in their little spacecraft. Well, now people are talking about consciousness. They're saying not so fast with aliens. Grusch is talking about different dimensions. Nobody is, these craft that are crashing are in fact like the sport saucers, not possibly the motherships that did cross vast distances. We're just looking at this thing differently. And the final thing that I would observe is stigma is still there around the topic. You've seen it, Ross. I've seen it. People who are listening have seen it. But it doesn't have the same traction it did before. More and more people have an open mind. And if they say, show me the evidence, that doesn't bother me at all. That's what I say. Let's get the evidence. Let's take a look at it. And, how interesting will it be if a year from now, Ross, as we look back and we go, wow, didn't see 2024 breaking it open like it did, but man, we are living in new times. I can only hope for that. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Truth will out, Bryce. Secrets have a way of wriggling their way to the surface.
Go hit the beaches in Australia. I'll go garden a little bit.
Go and change nappies of that new little granddaughter you got, mate.
Yeah. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.